This really happened to me in Cleveland, Ohio, and even now it feels raw enough to taste, like metal on the tongue. I'm a 61-year-old widow with a small house and a long memory, and this is exactly how it went. My sister-in-law laughed at my house in front of everyone, her voice ricocheting off the chipped concrete of my front steps like a BB on a soda can. It was July, the grill hissed on the patchy grass behind my lemon-yellow Cape Cod in Parma, and the folding table, my Eddie's old workbench, was sagging under crock-pots and paper plates. She held a plastic cup of rosé and looked up at my sun-faded siding, at the sagging gutter I hadn't fixed yet, and she laughed, loud enough that neighbors across Ridge Road could have heard. "Maeve," she said, faux sweet, "don't you ever get tired of this?" That's how the humiliation started, right there, on my own porch, with the smell of charcoal and sweet corn, and everyone gathered because my brother Jake had asked to use our yard for his birthday. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I had been trying to keep the yard alive in the heat, dragging the hose around in bare feet, feeling the grit from the driveway stick to my heels. Our parents used to say this house was stubborn as a mule. It was the first thing Eddie and I bought after we started over, back when the steel mill closed and we were all trying to get our footing. After he died, it turned into more than a roof. It was the stage I stood on when I remembered I could keep going. But Trish wasn't interested in stages, just spotlights, and she liked to make sure they were always on her. She's married to my brother, and if you asked her, she'd say she curates spaces for a living, i.e., she posts perfectly filtered photos of gray kitchens and brass cabinet pulls on Instagram, consulting on refreshes for the kind of people who think a room is something you buy. They rent a colonial near Lakewood Park with 2 dormers and a fake barn door in the dining room, and she's forever correcting me that it's Lakewood proper, as if the zip code alone might absolve you of being common. My brother, who used to throw a football with me in the street and slide down Metropark's hills on cardboard, has a contractor's license and a soft spot for Trish's opinions. Together, they're smug enough to power the whole West Side market, so when she lifted her cup that afternoon and laughed at my paint, it didn't just sting, it rang. People turned. My neighbor Rosa froze with her tongue over the brats. My niece paused mid-dip, a smear of queso hanging off a tortilla chip. Trish took a little stage step, almost like she rehearsed it, and said, "Honestly, Maeve, I know you love your vintage vibe, but at your age, wouldn't it be nice to have something you don't have to fix every weekend? We could help you find a place in Rocky River, low maintenance, totally you." I wiped my hands on a towel and smiled with all my teeth. Inside, it felt like someone had tipped a bowl of ice water down my spine. "This is the place I want," I said, "but thank you." She winked at Jake as if I were a punchline they'd rehearsed in the car. "We'll talk," she promised the crowd, turning the laugh into a toast. She had a way of making my home into a project without ever lifting a hammer. Later, I found out she had already posted a photo of my porch swing on her social, calling it a callback to more innocent times, with an emoji that felt like a slap. It got 1,000 likes from people who would never know the swing still held the shape of my husband's shoulders. In Cleveland, we are suspicious by nature of slick talk, of overnight miracles, of big grins without calluses behind them. The week after the barbecue, a letter from the city of Parma arrived, recommending I address minor exterior maintenance issues to prevent escalation. It was nothing catastrophic: peeling paint on the fascia, a leaning downspout, the kind of notes that show up when someone calls 311 about the house on the corner that doesn't fit their feed. The date stamped on the complaint matched the evening after Jake's birthday. I held the paper above my sink and felt that cold again, but this time it settled into resolve. I knew who had called, and she hadn't even bothered to block her number when she posted another Love Where You Live story from her rental kitchen, cropped tight so you couldn't see the landlord's fan rusting above the stove. I scraped paint. I reseated the downspout. I cut branches from the maple that Eddie planted the summer after his third chemo, and I stacked them neatly by the garage. There's a rhythm to maintenance, and if you've ever nursed someone you love, you know that detail is a kind of prayer. And while I was up on the ladder, listening to the bus brakes sigh on ridge, the plan began to form the way a bruise blooms, slowly, decisively, with colors you don't expect. I didn't tell anyone what I was thinking, not even Rosa. My life had taught me that you don't announce your backbone before you stand up. The following Saturday, my niece asked if we could meet at Barocco Arepa Bar on Madison, and we sat at a high table where I could watch families stream in from Lakewood Park, bright towels over their shoulders. She was 23 and 2 years wiser than I'd been at that age. She was also bored at the mockery she saw at home. "Aunt Maeve," she said, stirring a lime into her agua fresca, "Mom wants me to convince you to sell. She says the house is holding you back." "From what?" I asked. "From being invited to her friends' houses," she said dryly. We laughed, and it loosened something. She also keeps saying the landlord at our place is trash, always late on repairs, but she won't let Dad call because she wants to handle it, and then nothing happens. I just thought you should know." I pinched a piece of arepa until the steam escaped. It was a good reminder that even manipulators sweat. "Thank you," I said. I paid the bill and walked home under sycamores that dappled the sidewalk, my mind clicking into place. Once, a lifetime ago, I learned how to go very quiet before I make a big move. It's a habit I picked up when the mortgage bubble burst, and we were counting each dollar on the counter at Dave's Market, trying to make the math sing. In 2010, when everything fell apart, I got my bus dispatcher job with the district, and I also started reading Cuyahoga County auction listings like hymns. You learn the neighborhoods that break your heart in ways you can afford. We didn't crow about it, and after Eddie died, I kept that quiet, bone deep, which is how, without anyone in the family knowing, I became landlord to a handful of unglamorous duplexes, including a nice colonial off Clifton in Lakewood proper, bought through a sheriff's sale under an LLC with a name so dull it slipped through conversations like tap water. Trish had been paying me rent for years. She just didn't know it. You can call it petty that the revelation mattered to me, but humiliation has a way of making you want to turn a light on, and I didn't plant this story so it could grow in the dark. I called Lena, my realtor friend at Howard Hanna, Lena whose mother taught me how to fry sauerkraut balls, whose son I taught to parallel park. "I want to list the Lakewood Colonial," I told her, "first right of refusal to the tenant, as required, but I want to be at the closing." "You're sure?" she asked, and I could hear the professional bridle, the caution, the curiosity. "Yes," I said, "I'm very sure." We arranged the inspection. We pulled the rent ledger. We had the roof guy from Berea clear the gutters. On paper, we did everything a responsible seller does. Off paper, I rehearsed a single sentence in my head and learned how to wait. When Trish laughed again at my house, I wanted the sound to travel all the way to a glossy conference table and die there, quietly, right in front of a stack of closing documents that had my name on the signature line. And the night before Lena scheduled the open house, that would really be a private showing for the tenants, another letter arrived at my Parma place. Another 311 complaint, this one about overgrowth along my back fence. I snipped weed tops with scissors under the porch light and smiled, because sometimes a second stone thrown at your window just confirms you're awake. The worst part of humiliation is the part where you start to agree with it, where you stand in your own kitchen, look around, and wonder if maybe you are shabby, maybe you do deserve gentle condescension. I refused to live there. I wrote a list of what I loved, the way the afternoon light lands like a blessing across the chipped enamel sink, the way my porch swing sings when it rains, the faint scent of lemon oil in the floorboards that keeps Eddie with me on bad days. I tacked the list to my fridge with a magnet shaped like Ohio, and I made coffee, strong enough to hold on to. By the time Lena confirmed the date, my plan was less a plan than a weather system. It would arrive when it was meant to. All I had to do was stand where I was and withstand it. I dusted the mantel, changed my shirt, and waited for the clouds to move. The open house at the Lakewood Colonial was scheduled for a Saturday at 10, and Lena kept it more formal than a tenant walkthrough because she knew Trish's kind. "A little pomp," she said, "so she thinks it's her idea." I parked 2 streets over because it never hurts to let good fortune recognize you at a distance. The blue hydrangeas I'd planted by the stoop looked fat with water, the result of me sneaking by at dawn to drag a hose across the lawn like a guilty lover. I wanted the place sweet, but not singing, dignified, but not desperate. A house is a character, and you don't want to dress her out of type. Trish arrived in a white SUV, my brother behind the wheel, as usual. She shimmied herself out with a tote bag that said, "Eat, sleep, design," and kissed Lena as if they were old friends. "We love this place," she said loudly, turning to the neighbor who had accidentally wandered over to check out the commotion. "We've poured our hearts into it. It's practically ours already." She smoothed the doormat with her toe and walked in like a tour guide. I stood just inside the living room archway, where the crown molding I'd had repaired turned honey in the light. She pointed to it. "The molding," she said. "We had to beg the landlord to fix it. Total nightmare. Months." Lena said neutrally. She has a gift for swallowing reactions without ever appearing hungry. "Let's head to the kitchen. We'll talk through the tenant's right to purchase before we tour." We sat at the little breakfast nook I'd saved from Goodwill. White table, 2 ladder-back chairs, and Lena spread a folder like a deck of cards. "I'll be representing the seller," she said, then paused long enough for the room to fill with what wasn't said. "If you decide to write an offer, you'll want your own agent for the buy side." "I am my own agent," Trish declared. Of course she was. She had gotten her license last year for her brand, a phrase that made me want to chew nails. "And what exactly is the seller's situation?" "An LLC," Lena said. "Standard, Shorebird Capital LLC. The managing member will be at closing if your offer is accepted." Trish didn't blink. She didn't know enough to. "Glorious," she said. "We'll make this quick." In the dining room, where the light fixture had been rewired by my neighbor's son who just passed his union exam, Trish told Jake, "Get a video of me stroking this wainscoting." He obliged, and she turned to Lenz with a pouty face and murmured about classic lines. She was composing a little movie in which she saved this old house from neglect, and people would watch and applaud and comment heart-eye emojis while I sat on my Parma porch with a paint scraper. We finished the tour. She breezed through the bedrooms like she was forgiving them for existing, and ended in the basement, where concrete sweated and the washer rattled its usual blues. Lena gave a quick nod to me, tiny, enough to steady me, like a fingertip to a teacup to stop the circle from wobbling. "If you're ready," she said, "we can head to the office to draft the offer." "First American title on Euclid?" Trish asked, like she was checking her reflection in a storefront window. "That's the one," Lena said. Trish took Jake's arm, and as they went upstairs, she called, "Maeve, are you coming? I want you to see how this is done." I had been planning to sit in my car and breathe, but sometimes the moment you planned isn't the moment you get, and the best revenge is proximity. "I'll be there," I said, and my voice didn't shake. They left. I touched the banister. I thought of every check Trish had Venmo'd to the property manager, how each payment had hopped like a sparrow across a wire and landed finally in a tree with my name carved on it. My hands were steady. I followed them out into the sun. I drove downtown with the windows half opened so the wind could tear worry into strips. East 9th grew into a canyon of glass and intention, and at First American's office the air conditioning grabbed my shoulders like an aunt who hadn't seen me since Easter. We sat at a polished conference table that reflected our faces back at us like a warning. Trish placed her tote bag on the table and pulled out a gold pen like a small sword. Jake kept checking his phone, the little muscle in his jaw jumping every time a notification made a desperate sound. Lena placed the draft offer on the table between us. "Standard earnest money," she said. "Inspection period. We'll need proof of funds for the down payment and lender pre-approval." Trish's pen scratched like a cricket. "Done, done, done," she sang. "Let's set a closing 3 weeks out. We have plans. We want to celebrate summer in our home." Lena slid the last page forward and tapped a line with a neat nail. "And you understand the seller is Shorebird Capital LLC. The managing member is Maeve K." She said my last name clearly, like a bell. She looked up, not at me, but at Trish. "Silence is a strange animal. It grows fur in your ears. It slides in under the door. It makes you notice the seesaw of your own breath." Trish blinked once. Her brain ran the math and refused the answer. "I'm sorry?" she asked, smiling, as if she'd heard a joke and wanted to be polite enough to laugh on cue. "The seller," Lena said, in that patient voice professionals use on people who are used to steamrolling, "is an LLC. The managing member is Maeve. She'll be at closing to sign. You've been paying her rent for years." My hands lay flat on the table like the surface of a lake. I didn't look at Jake. I wouldn't give him a place to rest his eyes. Trish's smile died piece by piece, like a string of failed Christmas lights, one little bulb at a time. "That's not possible," she said softly, her tongue catching on the P. Lena slid over the articles of organization, the public filing, my name on a line, my signature loop calm and familiar. Trish stared at it like it might turn into a snake. Jake put his phone down very slowly and picked it back up again, as if he expected it to offer him a different life. "How?" Trish asked me, not with curiosity, with accusation, like I'd burgled something from a museum. "Hard work," I said. "Frugality, long nights, luck, and the understanding that a house doesn't have to be granite and gold to be a home." Trish's mouth opened, closed, opened again, a fish pulled from a lake it thought it owned. You should have told us," she said finally, managing a tone of righteous injury. "You should have been transparent." "I was," I said, "with the county, with the state, with the IRS. I didn't owe." She made a sound then that I'm convinced only smugness makes when it realizes it can drown. A little gasp, pulled like a string on a broken ballerina. Her pen lay useless as a twig. I need a minute," she said, and swept out of the room on heels that had been purchased to be seen, not to escape. The door shut on a gust of cold air. Jake rubbed his forehead with 2 fingers like he could erase a wrinkle that had written itself across his life. "Maeve," he said, low, "why keep it a secret?" "Because, baby brother," I said, and I could call him that because only I ever had. "You married a woman who believes ownership is performance. I believe it's stewardship. The more people like her know, the more they try to take." He dropped his hand. For a second he looked 9 again, scraped knee from a fall on the curb, blinking at me for a bandage. Then his phone buzzed, lighting up his grown-up face, and the moment was over. "We'll need time," he said, lawyerly all of a sudden, because shame will make a new suit out of any cloth it can find. Lena gathered the papers with the same care she'd used to pick up a newborn. "You're under no obligation to accept this offer, Maeve," she said quietly, "in case you were wondering." "I wasn't," I said. Trish came back in with powder on her nose and a hard smile. "We'll proceed," she declared, "at market rate with a credit for repairs." Lena didn't look at me because she didn't have to. "We'll relay any offer to the seller," she said, cool as Lake Erie in March, "and the seller will decide." We left with nothing signed but truth. On the way to the parking garage, my phone buzzed with a notification from the City of Lakewood's building department, the kind you get when you sign up for public notices. An inspector had posted a stop work order at a house on Trish's block for an unpermitted deck. I hadn't reported her. I didn't need to. When you define yourself by appearances, You're the one who forgets the footings have to be real. I stood in the shadow of the Ritz-Carlton and watched the traffic on Ontario, thought about courtrooms and consequences, and felt very old and very young at once. It's funny what happens when a secret meets air. Family dinners went quiet. My mother, who'd let me cry into her apron after Eddie died, pressed my hand and said, "Good for you, baby." My father whistled low and said, "Well, hell." Trish posted fewer stories. When she did, I could hear the effort. She'd hold a mug in the Lakewood kitchen and talk about light and gratitude, and the camera would pick up a sharp note in her voice, like glass under a rug. She made the offer anyway, lower than fair, stuffed with demands. I declined. She threatened to move. I encouraged it. But the revenge I wanted wasn't to make her move. It was to make her understand she had never once been in charge of the narrative. So I escalated, but I escalated legally with the boredom of adults. I gave proper notice for a rent increase per the lease. I scheduled a safety inspection, which she had to be present for. I forwarded the city's registered complaint about her unauthorized DIY in the bathroom and reminded her we'd hire a licensed plumber and bill for damages if necessary, just as the lease allowed. "Ridiculous," she texted. "We've improved your property." "You've improved your self-esteem," I wrote back. "The property was fine." She threatened to lawyer up. She threatened to call the news. She threatened to expose me on social media, which tickled me so much I had to sit down. Exposure is only a threat to what can't bear the light. When she realized I wasn't going to capitulate, she did the thing manipulators do when the playbook runs out. She tried to make me the villain. She told mutual friends I was greedy, that I'd tricked them into living under my thumb, that I was performing generosity for sympathy. What she didn't know was that you can't sell a story when everyone has already read the ending on a piece of paper at first American title. 2 weeks later, they gave notice. I called Lena, and we put the Colonial on the market with the kind of photos that tell the truth. Rooms empty, as open hands. We had 3 offers in a weekend. The woman who won was a third-grade teacher at Harrison Elementary who believed the world could be tended like a garden. At the Cuyahoga County Justice Center, where the deed finally changed hands in a recorded whisper, I felt something unspool in my chest, a knot I'd been living around for a decade. On their last day, Trish and Jake loaded their white SUV with boxes labeled winter pillows, which made me laugh so hard I had to bite my lip. She refused to look at me. My niece hugged me so long my shoulder went numb, and when she pulled back, she said, "You didn't have to be that kind." "I did," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. Kindness isn't mercy when it's the truth. They moved to a smaller place in Fairview Park, a duplex with afternoon light but thin walls. Trish posted less, and when she did, you could tell the rooms were narrower. She stopped laughing at my house because the memory of the conference table had built a new room in her brain, and she couldn't unlive it. After the Lakewood sale closed, I bought new gutters for my Parma place. I had them hung on a Tuesday that smelled like cut grass. The installer from Garfield Heights whistled low and precise while he worked. I made him lemonade, and we talked about the Guardians' chances this year. When he left, I stood under the new line and thought about how the quiet click of water, finding a proper path, is one of the most satisfying sounds on earth. It's what the truth sounds like when it runs past you without having to catch in your throat. There was a final chapter, and I didn't write it so much as let it happen. 3 months after their move, the Ohio Attorney General's office posted a notice of fines for unlicensed home improvement advertising, and Trish's brand had made the list. My niece sent me the screenshot without comment. I called no one. I baked a pan of brownies and took them to Rosa, and we sat on my porch swing and ate them with our fingers and watched the sun drop behind St. Anthony's steeple. Humiliation has a half-life. It decays if you starve it of attention, but it can also give off heat long enough to keep you from freezing when memory drafts through the room. Every once in a while, I still hear Trish's laugh, a brittle little wind chime. But mostly I hear the bus brakes on Ridge, the slap of screen doors, my own breath steady as a metronome. The house isn't a palace, it's my witness. It saw me reduced, and it saw me rise, and its only requirement is that I keep it upright and watered, and remember that pride only counts when you can stand in it without performing. At Thanksgiving, the family gathered at my parents' ranch in Seven Hills, where the carpet still smells like church, and the pie warms on a stovetop that dates to 1987. Trish arrived late with store-bought rolls in a basket she called vintage, as if a handle could make cardboard taste like yeast. She kissed my cheek like a penalty and took a spot across the table. When my father asked us each to say something we were grateful for, she started to speak and then swallowed the words like a pill too big for her throat. "I'm grateful for roofs," I said when it was my turn, and let the family laugh a little. Then, because I can be generous, I added, "And for lessons that stick." Across the table, Jake smiled into his water and didn't lift his eyes. On the way home that night, lake effect snow started to draw clean lines across everything. The wipers made their metered strokes. I pulled into my driveway, the gutter shining like a new cuff, and the maple dropped one last leaf onto my hood with a sound like applause. Inside, the heat kicked on with the optimism of old machines. I washed the plates, I fed the cat, I checked the locks. Before bed, I walked the slow lap I always walk, bedroom, hall, bathroom, porch, and I touched the wooden door frame where, after Eddie died, I carved a small, careful M, not for Maeve, for mine. It's not a battle cry, it's a benediction, and when I turned the deadbolt, the metal slid home with a soft, final click that sounded like a sentence finally ending where it was supposed to, fucking.